Hey, welcome to another Sasha Responds video where I respond to questions and comments that you guys have left under recent videos. And the question that I'm going to answer today was selected by my producer, and so I'm going to read it and give you my kind of initial response. So the question for today is from Lee6179, and Lee says, if these past experiences or traumas correlate with, cause, or exacerbate gender dysphoria, is there a way to treat those underlying traumas that does not lead to transition? I know transition can take many forms, but I'm struggling to find a way to confront my past experiences, which may have led me to become gender dysphoric. So first of all, Lee, thank you so much for your question. I know this is really a sensitive and vulnerable thing to share. So I really appreciate you asking about this. And in general, when I see that there's something from our past that is really, really hard to confront, to me, that's actually a very important sign that this thing that we've been through or this thing that has happened to us likely needs some attention and some kind of compassionate consideration and some reflection. So that's kind of the first thing that jumps out to me when I read Lee's question. And I think a lot about something that I heard a fellow therapist say at a conference once. And he said, if a patient comes in, he's a psychiatrist, so he uses the word patient, not client, right? And anyway, he said, when a patient comes in and says, I'm okay to talk about anything and everything except this one thing, that's a big indicator to me that that's exactly where the therapy ultimately needs to lead. And that kind of came up when I was thinking about your question, Lee. So anytime that we are able to confront something difficult that we've been through, it will really help us to reflect about our experiences in a more whole way and see ourselves more clearly. So I think it's really important when we have an area of life that feels off limits, that we get curious about that and try to offer ourselves a lot of grace and compassion, but let's lean into that and try and understand why this particular thing is really just causing so much distress. And look, sometimes people go through genuinely traumatic experiences that are very obvious of why it's causing them difficulty or problems in trying to look back and confront it. So this makes a lot of sense, but I do think in order to be kind of well-integrated, whole people, we have to be able to face all of ourselves, including the difficult things we've been through. And when we're able to kind of fully confront ourselves and our experiences, I just think that opens up so many more possibilities for how we deal with various things in our lives and various kind of questions that we have and choices we have to make. So to Lee's question, can that lead to an outcome other than transition? It certainly could. I can't obviously predict what will happen for people, but in my experience, the better we're able to confront something, the better we are at having lots of different choices on how we want to respond. And in my experience, the better we understand ourselves and the more willing we are to confront complicated things, the more clarity we will have and the more self-knowledge we will have. And so even if a person has recognized that, hey, I have some traumatic experiences in my past that might be related to my gender dysphoria, and I'm kind of scared to touch that. I'm kind of scared to go there. I would say to that person, look, if you're willing to go there, you will just have more options, because even if a person ultimately chooses to go ahead with social or medical transition, if they do so from a place of clarity and fully owning their past experiences and understanding the interplay of this experience and my dysphoria or my past traumas and my past history and how it affects how I feel about my body and my identity, the more you understand about that, the better off you'll be. It doesn't mean you have to do anything particular or that you're not allowed to do anything in particular. I just think having more self-understanding only makes your choices and possibilities better and more clear, and you will have more options on how to respond. So, if you are somebody who's struggling to confront a really challenging past experience or something that has been weighing on you that you're a little bit scared to think about, I want to give you some ways that you might be able to start approaching that. So first of all, it's really important to remember that big emotions, even though they can be really overwhelming and maybe even a little bit scary, big emotions cannot hurt us. So that's really important to start out by just understanding, hey, if I really do want to confront something painful, I have to know that it's okay if this is really scary, if this is really hard, if this makes me feel really overwhelmed. That's okay. That is not going to hurt me. And then I would suggest before you even approach the challenging subject with that acceptance that, hey, big emotions may happen, start by just learning some strategies and techniques that can help you feel better and process and regulate your emotions. So for example, learn some breathing techniques. There's a really good technique called box breathing, which really helps to kind of bring down the nervous system and calm us down if we're starting to get overwhelmed. And experiment. Try different breathing techniques, try different grounding techniques. These are all easy things that you can search on the internet or Google. And if you find, hey, I noticed that particular grounding technique or that particular breathing technique really helped me to feel more calm, more connected, then I have that kind of in my toolbox so that I have a strategy when I begin approaching this difficult thing from my past, that if I ever feel too overwhelmed, I know I can kind of reach for that technique or reach for that tool and get calm. I often think about this, especially in therapy when approaching challenging subjects with clients. It's kind of like a vacillation back and forth. Like, okay, we can start approaching something difficult, but then if it becomes too challenging, let's just take a moment. Let's take a break. Let's kind of reorient ourselves to where we are now. Let's take a few deep breaths. And then when you're feeling more calm, okay, let's approach it again. So it can be a stepwise process. You don't have to jump into the deep end right away. Okay. So first of all, to recap, big emotions are okay. They're not going to kill you. They're not going to hurt you. Number two, learn some strategies and techniques so that you can manage and regulate big emotions if they come up. And then begin approaching the difficult subjects in kind of a back and forth process where you give yourself breaks, you return to it again, and you can kind of do this over and over until this subject becomes easier to tolerate. And if you are, if you have a trusted therapist who understands your goal, for example, for Lee's point here of like, I am here specifically to start confronting difficulties from my past, and I want to understand how those difficulties have contributed to how I feel about my body, how I feel about my identity, then therapy is a great place to do this. But not everybody has a therapist, and that's actually okay. I think there are a lot of great ways that you can begin approaching these things on your own. So first of all, I would suggest looking at things like narrative therapies. These are therapies that help a person to kind of go back and process something difficult they've been through while writing about their story or talking about their story and kind of looking at it from different angles and assigning kind of meaning to their emotions, to their behaviors. And so that can really help a person to process something they've been through in the past. And I would also recommend, if you have gone through something very specific, you might look up novels or memoirs or books written by other people who have been through that, particularly books that focus on how to heal and thrive after that experience, rather than just books that recount the trauma and kind of leave you hanging. I would look to see how other people who have been through something similar have responded, and maybe borrowing from those authors and those novels can be really helpful because, when we are going through something, particularly if it's heavy with a lot of shame, it's really easy to forget that even traumatic experiences that are awful and should never happen to anybody, unfortunately, they have happened to other people before, and other people have figured out, little and big ways to cope, to survive, and to thrive despite what they've been through. So don't hesitate to look outwards to other examples of people who have really come through those challenging experiences in a way that you think is healthy And again, that gives you more options and more choices on how to manage your distress and how to respond. So Lee, thank you so much for submitting your question. I hope that this was helpful today. And I want to tell everyone, I love getting comments from you guys. I read them and I really appreciate hearing from you. So if you guys would like me to respond to your comments and questions, please continue to leave them under my videos. All right, that's it for today. Keeping one foot in possibility and one in reality. I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure that you like and subscribe to my channel. And if you want to watch more, just click here. This information is meant for educational purposes only and not as a substitute for mental health services.